Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. Please pardon my appearance. I'm coming at you from the great state of Pennsylvania, and we are still on quarantine and will be for the next several weeks. So I can't get a haircut. I can't get a chemical peel. I can't even go to my local gym. So I would imagine by this time, I'm probably looking a little ripe, especially given the fact that it's after 12 midnight that I'm filming this video. So all those factors combined probably don't make me look my best. That being said, I do want to talk about market manipulation as it pertains in the antiques and collectibles trade and how it differs from market manipulation in the financial securities markets. So in 1934, the Securities and Exchange Act, also known as the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934, was passed and signed into law by then President FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt. This laid the groundwork for the creation of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC is the United States governing body that pretty much dictates and regulates and enforces the laws that govern financial securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, commodities, anything that's considered a financial asset that can be sold on the financial and stock exchanges is pretty much governed by laws that are put forth by Congress that are upheld by the SEC. Now, when you look at the antiques and collectibles trade, there is no equivalent to the SEC. The antiques and collectibles trade, by its nature, with few exceptions, which I am going to talk about in some of these videos, is a free market system. It is pretty much the wild, wild west. This is what makes it so appealing to a lot of people who have knowledge and a passion for antiques and collectibles, but also have a fundamental education and understanding of economics and finance. Most of these people also have more money than most, and they're able to come into these markets and they're able to manipulate them. Now, unlike the financial markets, manipulation of the antiques and collectibles markets, while in some cases unethical, some cases it's perfectly ethical, is not usually illegal. It can be. More on that in a bit. And full disclosure, guys, I am not a lawyer. If you have set questions about certain market manipulation tactics and what the scenario that you're involved in implies, you might want to talk to a lawyer. I'm just setting this up so that I can point to certain instances of market manipulation and point them out to you as examples. I'm not doing this to point fingers at anybody because, to be fair, I can't make a justified case as to whether or not something is legal or illegal. I can just tell you in my own judgment if I consider it unethical or not. And really, in all reality, that matters very little. Let's be honest. That's a gray area. So that being said, let me use this as an example to start out. Let's say that you work for XYZ Pharmaceuticals Company. And XYZ Pharmaceuticals Company is really working at a fast pace to develop a vaccine for a certain virus that has pretty much shut down most of the industrialized world at present time. Well, XYZ Company is guaranteed pretty much to be first to market with this vaccine. And again, guys, this is just an example. I'm not applying this to any such company out there at present time. I'm just using this to prove this point. And as a result of this information, you realize that this is not public information. You happen to know this information because you work alongside the research team that is developing this vaccine. Well, let's say that you take $10,000 out of your savings account and you buy stock in this company that you work for based on this information that you have. You have just committed insider trading. Even if you don't profit from the sale of that stock at a said time in future, because you bought that stock with the information that you have that is not available to the general public, you just committed insider trading. That is punishable by the SEC and the federal government at large. Now, I can't tell you what type of judgment would come down on you, what penalties they would apply based on that alone, but I can tell you that is illegal behavior. Now, if you do something similar in the antiques and collectibles trade, guess what? In a lot of cases, that may not be illegal. There is no governing body that oversees the antiques and collectibles trade. It is truly to definition, a free market system, with some exceptions. We're going to talk about them in subsequent videos. That being said, a lot of people are coming into these markets and they're manipulating them in ways that are not obvious to the general public and most people that are coming into these markets at large. Now, one of the things you have to understand is when people manipulate the market for antiques and collectibles, they tend to go after the easy targets first. It is true, if we start talking about the high-end art market, that market is massively, massively manipulated because it's items that are pretty much one of a kind, and they can be pretty much easily manipulated than something like an item that is mass-produced or still being mass-produced to this day. For instance, if you wanted to try to manipulate the market for this video game right here, and this is Ultimate NES Remix for the Nintendo 3DS, you would have a massive problem doing it just due to the amount of supply that's readily available on the market today. I mean, if you log on the eBay, you could buy cases of this game right now, and I think it's selling at a very reduced price at present time. That being said, in some of these other markets, when we talk about the market for vintage Pokemon cards, vintage Magic cards, graded or even vintage video games that may be factory sealed, maybe could be considered quote-unquote rare or scarce on the marketplace today, those markets are a lot easier to manipulate and the barrier to entry is low. For instance, I've said this before, those of you that watch my coin videos. The coin marketplace, or the rare coin marketplace, I should say, has a lot of idiosyncrasies to it. You could have two coins that are graded by the same grading company, same mint mark, same year, same condition, and one can sell for $5,000, and another coin graded the same, just because the eye appeal is different, could sell for $3,000. That doesn't tend to happen with pop culture-based collectibles. For instance, generally on average, two quote-unquote scarce Pokemon cards graded by PSA in 10 condition are going to sell for close to the same amount on the market at the same time. So when we talk about manipulating the market for pop culture-based collectibles, the barrier to entry is much lower than that of most established and mature collecting categories. And for the record, there are three types of collecting categories out there. There are speculative markets, there are established markets, and there are mature markets. And that's going to be the subject of another video, but I just want to introduce that concept in this video because it does fit. There are three different markets for collectibles: speculative, established, and mature. An example of a speculative market would be the market for Funko Pops, or the market, I know some of you guys are going to hate me comparing the two, the market for Pokemon cards. Now, it's true, if we're looking at the market for Funko Pops versus that of Pokemon cards, I'm going to tell you something that shouldn't be a secret to any of you guys out there. The market for Pokemon cards is more on its way to becoming an established collectible than that of the market for Funko Pops. The market for Funko Pops is comparable to Beanie Babies. Love me or hate me for saying that, that's the truth. When you talk about established collectibles, you're looking at items like comic books. Comic books are an established collectible that pretty much came into their own over the last few decades. It's an item that you really can't go back hundreds of years if you're going to look at the most valuable comic books today. You're going back to the 1930s, 1940s at most. That's an established market. A mature market is the market for traditional antiques, firearms, certain firearms, coins, currency, artwork. Those markets are mature. A market that really enters the antiques trade after it becomes established and catches on en masse, coins, currency, artwork, that market becomes what is known as mature in the trade. Now, some people will disagree on these terms and what categories fit into them. I can tell you, though, firsthand, the analysis that I just provided is fairly accurate if you talk to other experienced collectors, dealers in the trade at large. Now, what does this have to do with market manipulation? Well, if you're somebody who's coming into the trade and you're looking at some of these markets that you want to manipulate, if you're going to manipulate a mature collecting category, not only do you have to have a lot of money, but you also have to understand the idiosyncrasies of those markets. Remember, guys, most markets that are in the mature end of the antiques and collectibles trade are very sophisticated. Again, you're talking antique furniture, you're talking edged weapons, firearms, coins, currency, artwork. Those markets, you really have to have an understanding of the fundamentals and how those markets operate before you can come in and manipulate them. Also, you have to have a lot of money. Let's be honest. Let's compare a speculative market like Lego or even Magic the Gathering cards to that of high-end artwork. Well, no offense, the most expensive Magic the Gathering card at present time is probably the Alpha Edition Black Lotus, which even if you get gem mint condition, graded by BGS in 9.0, 9.5 condition, you could probably get it on the market today for $100,000, $150,000. I'm sure we all agree with that, based on previous sales. When you go into the high-end art market, though, there's paintings that cost $400 million. So if you're going to try to manipulate that market, obviously you have to have a net worth in the billions of dollars to do so. Where somebody who is a millionaire or a multimillionaire can come in and possibly manipulate the market for an Alpha Edition Black Lotus. This is basic knowledge. Now, when we talk about established markets, when we look at comic books, there's a lot of manipulation and speculation in that particular market. It's not a mature market, but at the same time, I think we can agree when we compare vintage comic books to something like vintage video games, vintage comic books have the edge. They've been around longer. They're more established. As a result, there are market manipulators operating in that market because, again, compared to some of these other markets, even if you compare comic books to Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering cards, there are certain Pokemon cards that now sell for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Well, there's certain vintage key comic books that only sell for $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000. So here you have an established market where some of the main pieces that people want to go after in that market don't cost as much as what's happening in some of these speculative markets. So that makes them attractive to market manipulators. Now, let me give you some examples of market manipulation. And I'm just going to read these off. I'm not going to go into detail because we're going to cover those in part 2 of this video. There is the creation of pools, buying, selling, bidding pools. This is when collectors or market manipulators or bidders or sellers get together and they either withhold items that are available for sale on the market, or they buy items, pull them off the market, and don't push them back into the market, because what it does is it drives down the supply, which in turn, if it's done correctly, drives up demand. When demand increases, in most cases, prices increase. This is basic economics. So these are technically called bidding pools or selling pools. You'll sometimes call them collector pools. Certain collecting forums will refer to them as collecting pools, where people are coming together and they're pretty much controlling the supply that they have of this particular collectible. For instance, a couple of years back, I remember on the CGC forums, believe it or not, this actually occurred. There were several people talking about hoarding copies of Amazing Spider-Man 129 in near mint minus or better condition and making sure that they didn't hit the market. And what that did was that increased the price of that particular comic book, because if you were in the market for an Amazing Spider-Man 129 in CGC 9.4 condition and people were buying up these items on the market and they were pulling them back from the market, obviously supply would drop, demand would go up, and prices would increase as a result if it's done correctly. This is not uncommon, and in most cases, again, I'm not a lawyer, but in most cases, it is not illegal. Other examples of market manipulation, pump and dump schemes, more on that in another video. Runs, ramping the market, price fixing. There is even something called wash trading, which I will get to in another video. Cross-product manipulation. Prime example of cross-product manipulation in the antiques and collectibles trade. Do you remember a couple of months back, or possibly it's longer now, when somebody traded the wonderful graded rookie card for a Nintendo World Championships cartridge? That was not in definition unethical. It was not illegal, but that was an example of cross-product manipulation where the rookie card that was traded for that particular game was worth more than the game. So as a result of that trade, a lot of people now assume that a Nintendo World Championships gray cartridge is worth over $100,000 because of that trade. I hate to say it, nothing against the participants in that transaction, but overall, that is an example of cross-product manipulation. You are taking one established collecting category, trading it for a speculative item, and showing as a result of that trade that that speculative item is now worth as much as that established item. That is a prime form of market manipulation, whether you agree or disagree. You can use different terms, but in my opinion, that fits the definition. So I'm going to talk about these topics more in depth in upcoming videos. I just wanted to use this as a primer to introduce the topic. I hope this video helped you. If it hasn't, please let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to all my new subscribers. I appreciate your time watching these videos. If there is something that you want me to comment on in future videos, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks, guys, and enjoy your night.